My name is Dr. Joel Rosen, and today we are going to be talking about, could healing from adrenal fatigue be this easy? Could healing from adrenal fatigue be this easy? So, I ultimately want to know if this sounds like you. Do you suffer with fatigue after a meal? Do you crave sweets during the day? Are you eating sweets and no matter how many sweets you eat, it doesn't matter because you still aren't satiated? You still have to have something after that sweet. It just doesn't feel like you're being satisfied. You must have sweets throughout the day. Your waist girth is bigger than your hip girth. You have frequent urination. You have increased thirst and appetite. And ultimately, you have difficulty losing weight. If that sounds like you, then chances are you are dealing with not only, and you're exhausted and burnt out, you're dealing with a fatigue-based problem. And it comes down to there is some kind of blood sugar dysregulation component to that as well. And ultimately, I want to know there's a stress component, meaning perhaps that you're under a high amount of stress. You have weight gain when you're under stress, or sometimes you can't gain weight under stress. You wake up tired no matter how much sleep you've had. You ultimately have excessive perspiration, or you perspire with little or no activity. You can't stay asleep. You crave salts. You're a slow starter in the morning. You have afternoon fatigue, and potentially you have dizziness when you stand up. If that all sounds like you, then chances are you're dealing with not only a fatigue-based issue, you're dealing with a blood sugar handling issue. And the two really go hand in hand. And I want to elucidate that for you and give you some insight as to, first and foremost, could healing from adrenal fatigue really be this easy? So let's talk about what we're going to be talking about today is going to be insulin resistance and adrenal fatigue. Excuse me for 1 second. Okay. Sit. Yeah, it's okay. All right, sorry about that. I have my daughter's dog at work today, Rooster, and she just wants a little bit of attention. So we're gonna be giving you, Rooster, a little bit of attention while we're doing this Facebook Live. So ultimately, could adrenal fatigue be this easy to heal from? And the reason I bring this up is because I had someone in a Facebook group that I belong to, and they basically said, hey, 90% of the people that are suffering with a fatigue-based problem have an insulin problem, and you shouldn't help them until they get this settled down. I think that was what he was really trying to say. But at the same time, he was very insulting because he told me that I'm charging an exorbitant amount of money to help people, that I just want to test them and I want to do genetic testing on them. I want to do Dutch testing on them, and I want to sell them a bunch of supplements when they aren't taking accountability for their own health. And I said, hey, look, you don't know these people. These people have seen so many people, so many doctors. They're doing a lot of different research. They're very dialed in on their diet, or they know about gluten and dairy, and they've tried intermittent fasting, and they've tried a keto diet, and no matter what they do, they're exhausted and burnt out. And he rebutted to me and said that I don't know what they're doing, I don't follow them with a camera, and that I am charging all this money to ultimately pry on sick people because I'm not telling them the truth about balancing their blood sugar. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do a Facebook Live and I'm going to address this. And again, I want to make sure that you're able to see all of this. So why should you listen to me first? And I say, well, I've suffered with my own exhaustion fatigue problem, and I've been told that there's no such thing as adrenal fatigue. I've created a website called The Truth About Adrenal Fatigue. And ultimately, I care enough to do these Facebook Lives week in and week out to give you information that no one else is giving you, whether we work together or not, because I know the information that you're missing can be the difference between putting all of the puzzle pieces together. And I always tell the clients that I work with, you're so close, yet you're so far. And I thought this is a really great topic because ultimately, insulin resistance is a huge problem. 60% of Americans, if not more, are obese. They're not exercising, they're eating synthetic foods, fast foods, processed foods, adulterated foods, chemically derived foods, carbohydrate-based foods, lack of nutrient foods, and they're not moving, and they have major blood sugar imbalances. They have an increase of supply, and their body doesn't need all of that, and they ultimately have to store that as a fatty liver, as triglycerides, as cholesterol. And if you don't fix that, you're never going to fix a fatigue-based problem. I would agree on that, but it goes deeper than that. So I really took stock, and I took a lot of offense when he told me, hey, you're charging these people, these poor people, ridiculous amounts of money and selling them supplements and ordering these genetic tests and Dutch tests. And he was telling me, well, yeah, that's true, because no other doctor is telling them that there's this genetic component, that no one size fits all, that the reason why they did a keto diet, or the reason why they did intermittent fasting, or the reason why they looked at doing these low carb diets was to help their problem, and it didn't fix it. So what are you going to tell those people? And that's where I'm creating this video today. So he also said that he found it unethical on my part that something that can be fixed for free 90% of the time is something that they are having to pay for. And wow, that's a rabbit hole for sure. That is a rabbit hole for sure. Unethical. So the hundreds of videos that I make, the time I spend, and the mission that I've made it my life to help people, whether they work with me or not, is unethical, number one. Number two, yeah, you can go to the library and you could do research, if people do still go to the library, and you could do research online. In fact, you can go to iTunes University and take all these courses that are there for free, but you need to pay for someone to give you either the sheepskin or the certification or the testing or the plaque or whatever it is to legitimize what you are studying that's available for free, so that you can ultimately have a return of investment. And that return of investment in this case is leapfrogging ahead of the frustration, the doing it yourself, the not having the energy, the not getting the answers, and not moving the dial for being able to fast track that. That's like saying, hey, I find it unethical that an airplane would charge you more money to get to Los Angeles from New York than a bus would. And my rebuttal would be, well, guess what? The airplane is saving you a lot of time, and the bus isn't saving you as much time, and you're paying for time. And that's really what you're paying for, ultimately. And anyways, I'm doing these videos for free, so it kind of got my goat. He also said, please start telling them, your patients, that they need to fast. Don't give them any advice unless they fast, yet you are asking them to pay. So it's interesting that he said that to me, because I could swear that the Hippocratic Oath is to first do no harm. Yet he's telling me that I should tell them to fast. To me, that is doing harm. When you're exhausted, burnt out, inflamed, having crazy amounts of cortisol, you are not going to do well with fasting because of the chaos, the metabolic chaos that's going on in your body. Please don't give them any advice until they fast. And so that is, in my opinion, violation of the Hippocratic Oath in doing harm, in omitting information, yet he finds it unethical that I am giving people advice, and I have a business, and I have a coaching client, and I dedicate my life to helping people that are exhausted and burnt out. Interesting. So he says, the real problem with almost 90% of you are too much freaking insulin. First and foremost is, I would say, go to school and understand proper sentence structure and grammar, because that is not a sentence. I think what you're trying to say is the real problem with almost 90% of you are you're making too much insulin, or you're causing insulin spikes. But he said you are freaking insulin. So he's saying you're insulin. That's what's the cause of damage to the mitochondria and to the cells of the entire body. Now, I would agree that insulin is majorly inflammatory. I would say that it would definitely impact the mitochondria, but I would say that it's not the only thing. And as you'll see in this presentation today, the inflammation, the environment, the exposures, the chemicals, the toxins, the endogenous things that we have in our body all create growth-like factors that will create inflammation. And I in fact said to them, hey, what about EMFs? What about the information that in PubMed they're showing that EMFs are major insulin disruptors? And he said, well, of course, I'm not telling people to walk around with their cell phones tied to their hip. And there's no getting out of Wi-Fi and 5G. There's no avoiding it. In fact, we have to do whatever we can to remediate it. And that doesn't mean you have your cell phone on your person all day, but if you're in a workstation, if you have a smart meter, if you have power lines, if you have your cell phone underneath your bed, if you're doing things that aren't proactive in your exposures to Wi-Fi and inflammation and signals, that's going to drive up your insulin. And these people could be trying to fast, eating keto as you're recommending, yet they're not moving the needle. And listen, I asked him, in my 20 years of practice, I found that it goes much deeper than just supporting your making of insulin. What have you found in your practice for the last 20 years? And he laughed and he said, well, I don't practice. I am a computer consultant. And you don't hear me going on his 45,000 page Facebook group, which he doesn't have, and telling him about what he should be recommending to his computer consulting people. So stay in your lane. Otherwise, we'll have something like this and we'll knock you on your butt to explain to you that you are doing harm, you're not helping people, and the goal is to educate them. And there's a lot of things that you actually said that I resonate with, but I just couldn't send an email to you saying this was wrong, that was wrong. I said, hey, let's do an hour presentation. So we are bombarding ourselves with too much information that matters very little and not focusing enough on the elephant in the room. I agree with that. I say, and he said this too, don't trip over dollars to save pennies. And don't do all these whiz-bam, shiny object products or supplements or new testing if it's not going to result in the end result of you getting better. I've always agreed with that. In fact, I believe in Pareto's principle in that 1% of whatever you do gives you 99% of the results, or 5% of whatever you do gives you 95% of the results, or 20% of what you try give you 80% of the results, or 95% of what you focus on gives you 5% of the results. You have to really have a targeted, informative, customizable, not one size fits all protocol that's going to help you recover from your health problem. So please start telling your patients to fast. Don't give them any advice until you tell them to fast, yet you ask them to pay. I mean, I don't know what to say to that. So here's what I wanted to talk about. He did mention that 90% of the problems can be addressed by doing these 4 things: keto diet, fasting, avoiding stress, and eating clean organic. Now, I would just say first off the top, eating clean organic is very vague, but I would agree that you don't want to have pesticides, glyphosates, conventionally grown, processed in a factory, preserved, artificial sweeteners and flavors, out of a fast food restaurant, out of a vending machine, out of a frozen, unless it's really organic based foods, because there's no nutrients in there. There really isn't. And if you start with that, you're gonna have a lot of improvement. And people say, well, I know it's expensive and I can't afford it. Well, I say cheap is expensive, or short term is long term. Meaning, yes, you may not have the ability to pay for that now, but it's gonna cost you in the end a lot more. And it's unfair, but it's an economic reality that the people that have more spendability spend less on things. That's because they get their value for whatever they invest in. They don't have to, and it makes a return on the investment, and they don't have to spend more for the same price of an object. And that's unfortunately what happens with interest rates. But anyways, that's a whole other story. So I would first agree with number 4. I would not agree with fasting, keto diet, and avoiding stress. I mean, obviously avoiding stress is an umbrella. Yes, I want to make sure that I'm minimizing my social media. I am not completely consumed with what's going on with politics and mandates. I would want to make sure that I'm not sticking my nose in other people's businesses or staying out of my lane, which I don't feel he's abiding by number 3. He isn't going out of his way to avoid stress. But let's talk about fasting and keto diet, because so many people I talk to have said, you know what, I've tried the intermittent fasting and it didn't work, or I tried going on a keto diet and it didn't work, and I still have fasting insulin levels that are very high. And by the way, it should be less than 3. I like to see it less than 1. On a lab range, it shows like anywhere between 4 to 24, and if you're above 24, then it's flagged. So we like to see less than 3 as a marker. And I would agree, no one is testing for fasting insulin, and I think it's really important that you test for fasting insulin. So going to the next, what he also mentioned in a couple of his other points were the real problem is not trans fats, not bad genes, not bad fish oils, not too much stress or thyroid issues or lack of exercise or gluten or A1 milk or lack of sleep or lack of creatine or a weak immune system or lack of magnesium. Those are not the real problems. The real problem is that people are eating too much more than they're expending. They're getting too many supplies and not enough utilization. And I think to a certain extent that is true. It is a problem. However, there's so many people like we work with that have that perfect storm of environmental triggers overlapping with genetic susceptibilities, that have tried the fasting, keep their carbs low, have higher fats, and still don't feel good. And they have a lot of these issues. They have major genetic susceptibilities, and we'll get into that right now, actually. So as far as 90% of this can be addressed by these things, we'll continue to explain those. But I wanted to explain this diagram first. So hopefully by now you've heard of Mtorr. Mtorr is growth-like factors. So we are seeing a rise, an epidemic, tidal wave of chronic health problems, notwithstanding what's going on with COVID, but we're talking about insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, obesity, anxiety, depression, mood disorders. I mean, you can see an onslaught of autism, depression, anxiety, panic, overwhelm, suicide, homicide, all of these things that are going on. And I would say genetics haven't changed at all. Maybe they've evolved a little bit over the years and they've eliminated certain things and added certain things. And however, what has changed is the environment. And we see so many disruptors in the environment, like we put antibiotics in our feed, we put growth hormones in our feed, cows are eating corn and wheat. We're seeing, unfortunately, synthetic foods with fortified B vitamins and iron-enriched foods. We're seeing EMFs, and we're seeing glyphosates, and we're seeing pesticides, and we're seeing plastics, and we're seeing chemicals, and we're seeing polyesters, and we're seeing all of these things that are being admitted into the environment. Now, what do? They're not avoidable, and I do feel our body is able to adapt and overcome. But what it does is it stimulates our Mtorr. What is Mtorr? Mtorr stands for the mammalian target of rapamycin. What does that mean? It means that it's what causes growth-like factors in our body. So it causes cellular reproduction. When a mother is gestating and having a baby, she is under Mtorr. Now, we're under Mtorr every day. Our muscles are always building and repairing, but we're talking about laying down new foundations. And this comes down to IGF-beta, this comes down to insulin, and all of these things will stimulate growth-like factors. So even if you're fasting, even if you're eating healthy fats, even if you're lowering your carb intake and handling stress and eating organic, you're still gonna be overstimulating Mtorr. And when you overstimulate Mtorr, you're going to stimulate insulin. And when you stimulate insulin and you also have a crappy diet and you have genetic susceptibilities and you have environmental triggers, you're going to have that perfect storm of overlapping your body. And I couldn't explain this in an email to this gentleman, but this is what we're seeing. I mean, there's pesticides in our foods. There are a lot of artificial glutamates and sweeteners and flavors in our foods to make it more addicting. We have a lot of iron synthetic things in our foods. We're putting a lot of synthetic B vitamins in our foods. We're also, like I said, adding growth hormones and antibiotics and eating way too much proteins, and that's causing growth factors. So even if someone goes on a paleo type diet, that could stimulate insulin as well. And if that's going to stimulate insulin, that's going to create growth-like factors. That's going to stimulate your HPA axis. And that's what I wanted to explain was I wanted to explain what happened here? I wanted to explain how Mtorr stimulates your mast cells. Mast cells stimulate your HPA axis, and that causes a rise in histamine. So what does that have to do with what this gentleman told me? Well, what this has to do is it's not quite simple as saying, okay, you need to go on a ketogenic diet. In fact, I went on a ketogenic diet and it didn't work for me because I have major susceptibilities in my FAD enzymes. Those are called fatty acid desaturases. I don't utilize them, and they oxidize. And when they oxidize, that depletes me of glutathione. And if my body's already inflamed and I'm not able to put out those fires, that's going to cause my insulin levels to go up. So I could actually create insulin resistance when I'm eating fatty-based foods. So what say you, Mr. Sir, Mr. Computer Engineer guy, that tells me that I'm stealing from these people because I don't just tell them to fast, eat fats, and what was the 4 things? He said that you just have to tell them to fast, go on a keto diet, eat clean, and avoid stress. I mean, I wish it were that easy. So anyways, what I did want to show you is that once Mtorr stimulates your mast cells stimulate your HPA axis, it becomes a vicious cycle. It just really becomes a vicious cycle. And when that becomes a vicious cycle, that's what we're seeing. Frustrated, exhausted, burnt out, depleted, not motivated, aggravated, sympathetically driven, panic-ridden people that have gone through the fasting, gone through the trying to avoid stress, gone through getting on a keto diet, and gone through eating clean, and they're still not getting better. So what do you say about that now? I mean, it just really irked me so badly to say that the real problem is a lot of insulin issues, but it's not just driven because you're eating cupcakes and bonbons. It's just not. And that's what I really wanted to get explained to you today. So I hope you found that very, very helpful. I know this was a very fast Facebook Live. Rue kind of interrupted us, so we ruined our flow a little bit. But I always give a person the ability that watches this in the Facebook group, an ability to do a 45-minute consult with me. This is a time for us to figure out what's not working in your health, why going on keto or trying to fast or limiting your stress, or you've already gone on an organic diet and you're still exhausted, you still have no libido, you still can't lose weight, you still can't gain weight, you still can't fall asleep, you still can't wake up feeling refreshed, your hormones are off, you just don't feel good. What we want to do is figure out why. How's it impacting you? What's at stake? What are you not doing in your life? And what are you missing out on? Because I really want you to understand that we have one go around, and until you fix this, there's no price you can pay on being sick and bedridden. And so what I wanted to do was give you the opportunity. I'll put the booking link underneath this video, the ability to have a 45-minute no obligation, meaning there's no obligation for you to have to do any further work with me. And ultimately, sweetheart, 1 second, I'll be right with you. And there's no obligation to do any further work with me. All it would be is figuring out, what have you tried? What's missing? Where do you want to be? And how can we reverse engineer where you are now with where you want to go, with what's missing, with what's showing up, with what's not being done, and with what needs to be done. I'll give you a step-by-step plan of what you need to do in order to get there. And if it ends up that we end up doing work together, great, we'll let you know exactly how that works. However, if we don't do work together, you'll still have a step-by-step plan on exactly what you need to do to end this nightmare. So hopefully you found that really helpful. I look forward to your feedback and letting me know if I'm helping you. That'd be great. letting me know that you think that I'm not helping you, that's great too. I'll create a video around that. And Rue also just wants to say goodbye. Rue, why don't you say goodbye here? Come here. Look. That's how sweet Rue is. That's my rooster. All right, we'll talk to you guys later.